Warning, the following podcast contains adult language, themes, and situations. Also, the film we're about to talk about is going to be spoiled thoroughly. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
The last time Nicolas Cage did a Marvel movie, we ended up with the disastrously awful 2011 film Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. But in true Nic Cage fashion, he followed up that blunder with a masterpiece. So throw on your spider suit, tie the belt on your trench coat, and pop on a fedora as we take a brief journey to the incredible animated world of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay, let's run.
I'm like a prickly pear.
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole! Porker, how'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? Hey, have you ever been dragged to the sidewalk and beat until you pissed blood?
Welcome to One Cage at a Time, the show where we break down every single Nicolas Cage movie, one film at a time. Here are your hosts, Patrick, Vince, and Nigel.
After getting bitten by a radioactive spider from another dimension, teenage Miles Morales is forced to take up the mantle of Spider-Man so he and a group of spider people from the multiverse can stop the supervillain Kingpin from activating an interdimensional collider capable of wiping out all of their universes.
Ladies and gentlemen, here are your stars.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse stars dope star and scene stealer Shameik Moore, rebooted Captain Kirk Chris Pine, Marvel's new Hawkeye Hailee Steinfeld, New Girl star Jake Johnson, the new Blade, if it ever gets made, Mahershala Ali, Lily Tomlin playing a decidedly less stupid character than we saw in Ant Bully, SNL alum and stand-up comedian John Mulaney, Donovan star and the Sabertooth we don't talk about, Liev Schreiber, the voice of Baby Shark Kimiko Glenn, and of course, a real tough mug. Yeah, that's right. I'm talking a hard boy who can take down any biscuit boxer, Academy Award-winning actor Nicolas Kim Coppola, better known as Nicolas Cage.
Let's dive into the nitty-gritty.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was released on December 1st, 2018 at the Regency Village Theater in Los Angeles, which I guess that's just the premiere, and then was released wide in the US on December 14th, 2018. Had a budget of $90 million, which is pretty steep for an animated film like this, that I don't think there were any expectations about. I feel like this was kind of like, it flew under the radar because I didn't even know what it was when it came out. And then when I watched it, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. How did this get made by Sony? But box office, it made $384.3 million. Spoilers for when we eventually talk about Beyond the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse made like $800 million or something like that. So we can't count it as a Nic Cage movie because he doesn't speak in the movie. He does sort of kind of show up, but we can't count it. The character shows up just in the background in a couple scenes. Spoilers. But yeah, that's a lot of money for a like I said, like a animated film that kind of flew under the radar. I don't think there were any expectations of what a Miles Morales starring Spider-Man animated film was going to do, but I don't think anybody expected it to make $400 million. I'm really hoping that, because they teased Aaron Morales in, I think it was the first of the Homecoming. Yep. So I'm hoping that they eventually like transition to Miles Morales' story with Tom Holland, because he apparently exists in that universe because Aaron Morales exists. So, and he says like, my nephew lives around here in one scene. So hopefully that also means that Donald Glover would play the Prowler eventually, which would be amazing. Yeah. This was directed by 3 directors. First time we've ever had that happen. That's, I mean, you know, it's a huge undertaking. This film is like, there's so much going on visually and with the performances, and everything in between. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous film all the way through. But it was directed by, we'll start with Bob Paraschetti, who started as a storyboard artist for Shrek 2, worked on Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which I feel is like the fourth time that we've talked about Curse of the Were-Rabbit on this show. Did the storyboards for Monsters vs. Aliens, before becoming the head writer, and I believe, I don't know if he actually directed, but he was on Puss in Boots, the original one, the 2011 one, and The Little Prince. All three of our directors, of course, ended up going on to win an Academy Award for this film. Also won a BAFTA, Critics' Choice, and a Golden Globe, which is pretty amazing. I don't know what they were up against, but I still feel like they would have crushed pretty much any competition with this film. Our second director, Peter Ramsey, started in the 80s as a storyboard artist, noticing a theme, working on Predator 2. Then he ended up working on Independence Day, Men in Black, worked on both Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, as a storyboard artist. And then Fight Club, Castaway, you get the idea. He's got an extremely successful track record of working as a storyboard artist, but then went on to direct Rise of the Guardians, which did not do well, but also directed a few episodes of The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. And then our third director was Rodney Rothman, who was a longtime writer for David Letterman. Ended up producing a handful of Judd Apatow films and was the co-writer for 22 Jump Street. I don't know how it worked behind the scenes, having three different directors. I mean, I'm assuming it was storyboard, visuals, and then there was, the actors' performances and maybe a little bit of a mix. It seems like the writers were also very involved in the directing of the cast and stuff. So the writing team is Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, though Phil Lord is the only one who's actually credited. But they both appeared behind the scenes and they both talked about putting the film together. And I think Phil Lord was the only one who won an Oscar out of the two. But they are a team, and they've worked on a ton of things together. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Lego Movie, which they crushed, and then 21 and 22 Jump Street. And at least Phil Lord won an Oscar for this film, for Best Animated Feature Film, which I think that they're both credited in the actual credits of the film, but I think on IMDb it's only given to Phil Lord, so I don't know why. It's, maybe it's something like how the Coen brothers were like not actually able to say that they both directed it for the longest time. So I think Ethan got the directing credit on every film, or Joel. I think Joel got the directing credit, but they both directed everything together for their whole careers. So I don't know how that works. I think it's like you have to hit certain rules in order to qualify for the Oscars. So maybe they had to say that only one of them was like the head writer or something like that. I don't know. Edited by Robert Fisher Jr., who also edited Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 1 and 2. The Smurfs, A Christmas Carol. That's a movie, apparently, is The Smurfs Christmas Carol. But he did not work on Across the Spider-Verse, which is surprising. I figured they would have kept this team completely the same. And I do notice that movie is not quite as, smooth as this one. Like, this one is, like, pretty much perfect. But Across the Spider-Verse, spoilers, is a cliffhanger. And I think that kind of detracts from it.
Yeah.
It sounds like 2027 is like the projected date for it. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't like just try to do the films together, like so they could release them like a year apart or something like that.
Maybe Lord and Miller are busy.
Yeah, maybe.
It's probably like, I don't know.
23 Jump Street.
Who knows? Maybe, but I'm guessing a lot hinges on them and their availability. And after this, the first one, they were able to negotiate whatever the hell they wanted out of making 2 sequels.
Music by Daniel Pemberton, who has 5 Golden Globe nominations and an Oscar nomination, who has kind of become the go-to composer for Guy Ritchie, Danny Boyle, Ridley Scott, Aaron Sorkin. Worked on films like Steve Jobs, Ocean's 8, The Trial of the Chicago 7, which I haven't seen, but I believe that was the one he got an Oscar nomination for, etc. Kind of I don't know, like a composer for hire, but kind of a go-to for those guys I just mentioned. Like they just keep going back to him. Music is amazing throughout. I love the little like the sound design on like when the Prowler shows up and stuff is really cool. There's all sorts of those little things where it's just like, yeah, it's beautifully done. Ratings. This is has since gone up since we first talked about this. We talked about this, I believe, on Pig or something like that. We talked about all of the 90% in Nicolas Cage's career. This one has since gone up over time to 97%, which is incredible. That's 8.4 out of 10 on 66 reviews. I don't know the math, but I would say that means like 65 of the 66 gave it a 6 or above. 64 out of 66. Yeah, pretty amazing. That's definitely the highest movie that we've talked about. Because we talked about Red Rock West had since gone up to like a 96, but now Into the Spider-Verse has also gone up, so to a 97. It seems like usually films go the opposite direction over time. Like they find reviews where they're like more critical of it. Audience score on this is almost exactly the same, 94%, which I think is the highest audience score we have ever had on this show. That's incredible. Metacritic 87%, which I think might be the highest Metacritic score we've ever had. Yeah, that's way higher than, yeah, it's always like 69, 70 something for a good movie. But this one, 87%. I think that's far and away the highest Metacritic score we've ever had. IMDb, 8.4%. So it's exactly the same, aligned with the Rotten Tomatoes critic score. And then the cinema score was an A+, which is as good as you can do. Unlike Megapolis and Joker 2.
Has anything we've reviewed had an A+? Anything else?
I feel like there was something in there. I know we've had a few A's and a few A minuses, but I don't know. Maybe not. That's pretty damn good. Yeah, eventually I'll go back and kind of like go through all of these things and find what's highest rated and all that kind of stuff. But that might be like a recap show that we do at some point. We probably should do one for our 50th episode, but I ain't got that kind of time.
How about a Coppola quick facts?
Coppola quick facts. There were like 8 million quick facts. I found so much stuff, but I just kind of kept it to the stuff that feels relevant for us. Like I said, we can't spend 5 hours talking about this thing. We definitely could if we wanted to, but we should probably move along because we got important films like The Croods and stuff like that to talk about. The unique animated style of Spider-Verse aims to make the viewer feel as if they are in the pages of a comic book. According to Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the film combined the latest computer-generated animated technology with hand-drawn artistry. They actually said that they went back in and painted a little bit on every single part of the film. So it's like very CG, computer animated, but it also has that hand-drawn feel to it. I love the like pulp feel of like the characters have the like dots and yeah, it's incrable.
It still kind of gets on my nerves how things are blurred.
Yeah,
like
on the edges,
blurry.
it's like really blurred.
And a lot of times it feels like I'm watching a 3D movie without the glasses on, and it kind of catches me and throws me out. It probably popped really well, but when they have that kind of that blurred thing, it's like you're watching. It's like, oh shit, is this supposed to be in 3D and I'm not wearing the glasses? I thought we were done with those.
I mean, I noticed they kept with that in Across the Spider-Verse, but it seems to depend on what universe they're in, whatever reality they're in. Each one is a little bit different. So like Miles is just a little bit strange because this isn't our reality. His reality is not our reality, which you can tell by like the posters in the background for movies that don't actually exist. And like Common has a 4 on his hat instead of a 3, or not Common, Chance the Rapper. And there's a Shaun of the Dead sequel. I don't know if you saw that in Times Square. It's like tell Sean us part or something. I can't remember. From Dust Till Sean. From Dust Till Sean. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Which was the actual proposed name for a sequel for Shaun of the Dead that they wanted to do, that the studio wanted to do, but the stars and Edgar Wright were like, nah. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller said it was very important to us that every frame of the movie was refined by the artist's hand after the visuals were rendered by computers. If you freeze any part of the movie at any time, it will look like an illustration with hand-drawn touches and all. Which, I mean, that attention to detail is the reason that it takes so damn long to make this thing, but it also is what makes it so goddamn gorgeous throughout. And like, I feel like there's an instinct in Hollywood in general to just pump things out after they become popular, but they've kind of refused to do that and are actually taking the time that they wanted to take to finish this trilogy the way that they want it to be finished. So we're not getting Beyond the Spider-Verse until 2027. It was originally slated for 2025, and then the writer's strike happened, and then a bunch of things fell apart as far as schedules and all that, and now I think it's back in production, but it's going to take a while. Completing the animation for the film required up to 180 animators. It's the largest crew ever used by a Sony Pictures animation for a film, or Sony Pictures animation, which, yeah, crazy. I mean, Sony Pictures has done a lot of animated films. But this one, it shows, man. I don't know. It's gorgeous. And the second one is gorgeous, too. A little bit different feel, but very similar in tone. The film was dedicated in memory of Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko, who died on July 6th, 2018, while this film was finishing production. However, this was not the only dedication, as a month before the film was released, Stan Lee also died on November 12th, 2018. And the film was dedicated to both of Spider-Man's creators, which I think was a cool little thing that they put in the credits at the end.
Yeah.
And then
Stan Lee was always ripping off Ditko.
Yeah. If you hit pause anytime a train goes by throughout the entire film, because all the animators wanted to do an animation of Stan Lee, he's in almost every single train car. There's like one little Stan Lee here and there. It was actually announced shortly after Stan Lee's death at age 95 that he had recorded a cameo for the film, and that it would be his final voice acting role ever. They actually went to his house. And apparently they had never gone to somebody's house to get something like this. But, you know, Stan Lee, he had to get it. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller felt it was important that Lee was then given a bigger moment compared to previous Marvel films because he was so integral to the spirit of the film and considered his role extra meaningful following his death. Nice little final moment, better than Teen Titans for Stan Lee. If Teen Titans would have ended up being the last one, I would have been so sad. But this is the final Stan Lee cameo. I say, you know, his film cameos. I think what was it? The first the Captain Marvel movie, I think, was his final on-screen cameo, or no, Endgame, right? Or was he in the last Spider-Man one? I can't remember.
I don't think he was. I don't remember what he was in Endgame either.
He was the make love, not war guy in the car.
Oh,
driving
that's
by,
right.
and when they go back to the
when
70s.
they go back in time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think James Gunn had filmed a number of his cameos that they were going to use in multiple projects, but he was the last one that actually was filming live action stuff with them. And I want to say it was when they were doing Guardians 2, or maybe I'm trying to remember. They talked about they had him in or something. They used him to film like 2 or 3 cameos for other movies because, he was old and they couldn't book him to do a bunch of different separate shoots.
Mostly just throw him on a green screen. And
yeah.
And then finally, I have like 2 quick facts about Nic Cage. Nicolas Cage was excited that the directors let him have fun with the role of Spider-Man Noir. Cage says, "It's no secret that I like to play with different sources. It was fun to go back in time and pull back a little of that Humphrey Bogart essence." Of course. He said, I watched the behind the scenes and he was like, I was being reserved in the booth. And then they basically kept telling me to go for it. And they were excited because he was like, "Oh, so you want the full Cage?" And then they just let him do what he wanted. But apparently we're able to rein him in because we've seen what happens when Nick can do whatever he wants. But
I still like to think that was why he wanted to do the Humphrey Bogart impression at the end of Dog Eat Dog, is he'd been recording his lines as Spider-Man Noir. And he was like, "Hey, Paul, I got a great idea."
He had so much fun being Humphrey Bogart.
I don't give a fuck. We've got 24 hours to film your final scene. Okay, I got a great idea.
This is all money laundering anyway, so what's the matter? Cage thinks that the movie will appeal both to adults who like old movies and the kids who want to learn more about those old movies, I guess. I don't know. Or that was a weird quote for him to say, but
is he talking about Spider-Man?
I think he was talking about Spider-Man Noir and the older Spider-Man films.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I didn't know. This is my final quick fact. Nicolas Cage was actually considered to play Green Goblin before they went with Willem Dafoe, which would have been Willem Dafoe is a much better choice for that.
Yeah,
role.
That would
yeah. Not that I don't think Cage could have done it, but like Willem Dafoe is perfect for Green Goblin.
Yeah, maybe they'll have him play Norman Osborn in the MCU. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah, he was apparently at one point it was going to be him as Green Goblin and Wes Bentley as Spider-Man.
Who's that?
That's that douche from Ghost Rider.
Oh, that's right, from American Beauty
American
or whatever.
Beauty, yeah.
Jesus.
The bag boy, Ricky Fitz.
Well, luckily they both were reserved for Ghost Rider instead of Spider-Man.
They made much better choices there.
Let's break this bitch down. Act 1. Let's set some stuff up.
Our story begins by setting the tone of the film by having the Sony, Columbia, and Marvel logos glitch in and out while looking like pages from a comic book. We kick things off by introducing the current Spider-Man of the story's reality, and Peter Parker tells us his origin story. We all know it: bitten by a radioactive spider, became Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, etc., etc. He makes a point to say no matter how many hits he takes, he always gets back up, and that he's the only one who can protect New York since he's the one and only Spider-Man. We cut to Miles Morales chilling out, listening to music, avoiding packing up to go to a private school that he clearly doesn't want to go to. Miles passes by his old school, where he was obviously super popular and had tons of friends, then trips into the street because of an untied shoelace in front of a cop car that is driven by his dad. His dad, Jefferson Davis, tries to connect with his son, but Miles does the old "I'm too good for my extremely caring and loving parents" shtick that all teenagers do. Get ready for that one, Nigel. You're only a couple years away from that. At least he didn't tell his dad, "It's not my fault you don't have a life," like in Mom and Dad. It's like, just imagine this character hooting like Daffy Duck while being stabbed in the third act. Be a little bit of a twist.
I would pay good money to see that.
I do feel like we missed out on the Fruit Loops stuck to his dad's face, though, at the end of the movie.
I mean, he probably knows his way around a Sawzall.
Yeah.
Because it saws.
No, he does live in Brooklyn. I don't know. How often do you have to use a Sawzall in Brooklyn? It's called a super.
While all this is going on, we get a few little clues that something major is happening on the streets of New York that has been causing mild earthquakes, but Spider-Man is looking into it. Jefferson clearly doesn't think much of Spider-Man and his vigilante style of justice, but Miles is preoccupied with being embarrassed by his dad dropping him off, which is amplified when Miles doesn't say he loves him. So Jefferson tells him he has to say it back using his police radio megaphone thingy. Miles doesn't fit in at the new school and he thinks it's full of elitist snobs, but when he's late for a class, he makes a joke about Einstein saying time is relative that makes a cute girl laugh, so, maybe it's not so bad after all. Miles fails a test on purpose in the hopes of getting kicked out of the school for geniuses, but the teacher knows exactly what he's doing, so she challenges Miles to write an essay about the type of person he wants to become. Miles sneaks out of his dorm to his uncle Aaron's, where Aaron tells Miles to make a move on the new girl. And it's clear Miles and Aaron have a much better relationship than Miles has with his dad, since Jefferson is by the book and stuffy, while Aaron is a cool guy from the streets with a checkered past. Aaron sees the graffiti tag Miles sketched out in a notebook and asks if Miles has thrown them up yet. He takes Miles to a hidden tunnel in the subway that he knows about because he did an engineering job down there. It's not sketchy. There's a Diddy joke in there, but we'll just leave it alone. Miles spray paints his artwork on the wall, and we catch our first glimpse of a glowing radioactive spider, clearly destined to bite Miles.
He, of course, knows about the tunnel because he's doing the engineer job for Kingpin. Spoilers.
They never really say what Aaron does for his actual job. Mm-hmm. I mean, so it's funny. Is he an engineer or something that Miles wouldn't think is weird that he knows that there's this tunnel under the city?
Yeah, I feel like
it's probably something like that.
Like a private contractor. Kind of reminds me of Vulture in Homecoming.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he doesn't have an actual job. He's just the Prowler, but he just says he does something else.
Yeah,
yeah. Aaron guides his nephew through the process and helps him with the composition of the tag while we get teased by the spider almost biting Miles 12 times. Aaron says he and Jefferson used to do graffiti together back in the day, and Miles is shocked since his dad is always super uptight. By the way, in the comics, we should mention that Jefferson Davis was a SHIELD agent before becoming a cop, which is why Miles has his mom's last name instead of Davis. It was to protect his identity.
I was confused about that because I don't really know the full origin story, the official original origin story of is Jefferson Davis his stepdad or? Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, even in the, I think in this movie and in the sequel, they say that his dad has the last name Morales. So it's he either had the last name Morales or he took his wife's last name.
Mm. Well, I mean, clearly her last name is Morales though.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe that was her maiden name and he took it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember.
Or
it's
his
been a
last
long
name
time
was
since
Morales.
I read the Miles Morales comics.
I'm talking about this movie, though. The comic explanation can be whatever. I think maybe in the comics he has a different last name and Miles just has his mom's last name. But in this movie and the sequel, they specifically say his name is Officer Morales. His last name is Morales. Yeah, and I think in the sequel, when he's having the promotion party, they talk about it there. They mention it too.
I'm trying to remember too in the game in the New York games if his dad had the same last name or not. But
so I think to avoid it being confusing to casual audiences, they just said his dad's last name is Morales.
Last name.
Yeah.
Plus, it's 2024. You don't always have to take the man's last name. I know I won't.
As we found out in Dream Scenario, or we'll find out when we talk about it, you can take your wife's last name.
Yeah, that's a great tie-in. That's a great not cliffhanger, but foreshadowing for next film.
Yeah. Well, second to next film. Yeah.
Sorry. We're doing Crude's next. Miles takes a picture of his artwork, and the spider finally bites him. But Miles just kind of flicks it away, which was funny. Because they set it up all super dramatic. He's going to have a big reaction.
Yeah, that's great.
The next day, Miles wakes up feeling weird. And when he bumps into the new girl, she introduces herself as Gwanda rather than Gwen Stacy. Miles tries to do a cool guy shoulder touch thing his uncle Aaron taught him. But he ends up accidentally ripping out a chunk of Gwen's hair with his sticky spider touch. He's a teenager, though, so his hands could have been sticky for any number of other reasons. It's just puberty.
Yeah.
Miles freaks out and runs through the school while trying to get a handle on his new powers. Eventually, he walks on the side of the building and Gwen spots him. In his room, Miles realizes he's going through the same thing Spider-Man went through, so he runs to his Uncle Ben's... Oh, sorry. Wow. So he runs to his uncle.
You can make that a joke. His Uncle Ben. I mean, Aaron.
Yeah, to his Uncle Aaron's, but Aaron is out of town. Miles heads to look for the spider that bit him in the subway, and it glitches like crazy when he touches it. Miles senses something is wrong and ducks seconds before a window breaks behind him, and we see Peter Parker and Green Goblin battling while they talk about Spider-Man stopping a portal to another dimension from being opened.
One thing I was thinking about just now is like the Aaron relationship actually really feels like an uncle, whereas the Uncle Ben thing always feels like a father figure, like Uncle Ben took over as his father.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting take on it, like actually seeing the uncle character who dies, for spoilers, as an uncle, rather than a father figure.
And I guess they don't really give us age, but you have to, age of Aaron, but you would assume it's younger than the typical Uncle Ben too. So there's a little, it's a little easier
Uncle
for
Ben
Miles
is always, I think, is more like grandfatherly.
Yeah, he's always
figure
came off as a grandfather
but
figure, yeah.
I would say Aaron is probably like in his 30s or early 40s, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I assumed is he's probably...
He's the cool uncle.
30s,
Yeah.
A lot of people have,
Yep. Miles is accidentally pulled into the fight, and he runs into a giant opening where we see two jet engine-looking things on each side of it. Miles falls into a hole, but Spider-Man senses him falling and rescues him. Peter senses Miles has the same spider sense he has and wants to show Miles the ropes after he finishes with Green Goblin. Miles agrees, and Spider-Man heads to destroy the machine, but he's stopped by another villain called the Prowler, and we see Kingpin activate the device, which creates an opening to 5 different dimensions. Green Goblin pushes Spider-Man into the beam of the collider, and we see multiple versions of Spider-Man appear on screen for a second. A huge explosion destroys the collider and sends the villains and Spider-Man flying. Miles finds Spider-Man in the rubble, and Peter gives him a USB stick that will destroy the machine and warns Miles that if the collider is activated again, everyone he knows and loves will die. Kingpin finds Peter in the rubble, and Spider-Man tells him using the collider won't bring back Wilson's family, which pisses Kingpin off, so he smashes Peter's head, killing this reality Spider-Man. There can only be one! Probably a joke none of the younger viewers will get.
So
there surprisingly has not been a Highlander reboot.
That's actually
reboot.
Yeah.
I thought Henry Cavill was going to be Highlander. I thought they were already planning that.
It would make sense.
Yeah.
But also Henry Cavill gets shafted on projects all the time. So
True.
Yeah.
And not in the way that a lot of people would want to see, I think.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth?
Apparently he's going to be doing a Voltron show for
a live action
Amazon,
Voltron for,
I think.
Netflix, I think. Is it
No,
Amazon?
I think it's Amazon because it's somebody we're speculating like maybe it's part of his Warhammer deal with them is to like he also gets to be in a Voltron show or
Yeah.
So
So
it's just
is he just going to play one of the?
I don't know. I think
Voltrons?
it's just he's cast like as a character. He's not like running the show like he's doing for the Warhammer thing, but it may just be like maybe they roped him in for star power. They're like, okay, well you can do whatever you want with Warhammer. We're going to use you in other projects, and Voltron's one of them. He probably likes Voltron. He's a nerd. So
I mean, I would love to see a Voltron, like a modern adaptation of Voltron that actually works. That'd be great. I feel like every time they try to adapt these, they just kind of ruin them.
yeah,
But,
we'll see.
I never saw the Netflix show, but it must not have done very well because it didn't last very long. So
Yeah, that was
I didn't even know there was a Netflix show.
Easily my favorite show when I was a kid, and I had the whole set and put the tigers together to like make the Voltron. I was just like,
Yeah,
like
enjoyed-
the most awesome freaking toy as a kid.
yeah. See, I enjoyed the show that they ripped off, Power Rangers, so I hate Voltron.
Yeah, I was the Power Rangers generation.
Ugh.
Yeah. Go Power Rangers. Anyways, Miles accidentally kicks something over, so Kingpin sends the Prowler to kill that guy. It's a great performance by him here.
Yeah.
Terry Schiavo.
Yeah.
I mean, Liv Schreiber.
Liv Schreiber.
Chris Pine does such a good job of like setting up this version of Peter being an actual hero and like actually having that gravitas. And then I love the contrast between Chris Pine's portrayal of Peter Parker versus Jake Johnson's portrayal of Peter Parker, Peter B. Parker. It's like so like heroic and cool and smooth. And then Jake Johnson is just so like kind of, I don't know, like he just woke up on your couch. Asking you if you could drive him to the store.
At one point, you think he might be dead, decomposing on your couch. So you poke him with a stick and find out he's still alive. Miles narrowly escapes and runs home, where he gives his dad a big hug, and his mom asks if he was scared by the earthquake, and he asks if he can sleep there instead of at his dorm for the night. We see a news report saying that Spider-Man is dead, which breaks the hearts of basically everybody in New York. Miles buys a Spider-Man costume at a shop from Stan Lee and heads to a public wake at the Trinity Church, where Mary Jane tells the crowd that all of them have the ability to make a difference. Next, we see Ben Gates show up to find the Templar's treasure, which has been buried under that church since the 1700s, damn it. There's a lot of people here.
Peter Parker had to die, Ben.
He's got some stupid glasses. He's looking at stones and stuff.
He's looking at Peter's grave. It's buried here.
Buried here. Peter, Templar treasure.
By the way, like I've been to the Trinity Church a couple times now, and all of the graves there are from like the 1700s. So I don't find it plausible that they would bury Peter Parker there. I mean,
Maybe
I guess
they made
he's
an
a
exception.
hero, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
He's part of the Illuminati. They had to bury him there.
True.
Miles uses a bunch of Spider-Man comic books to try to figure out how to control his new Spider-Man abilities. He climbs to the top of a tall building where he stands on the ledge, but quickly chickens out and instead goes to the building next door. It's not quite so tall.
I love that shot. It's like just the shoes squeaking up the stairs and then squeaking down the stairs, then coming up a shorter building.
Yeah. He goes to jump from the building to another, but trips on his shoelace and slams into a taxi below, which breaks the device Peter gave him to deactivate the glider.
I love that like Miles is so fumbling and terrible at it, and then slowly gets a handle of it. Another cool detail that they added that I read was that when Miles is first introduced to us and like he doesn't really have his powers and slowly is getting his powers, they did it in 12 frames per second, and slowly as the film goes on they add more frames to him so that he's smoother, and by the end he's full 24 frames per second. But like at the beginning, if you watch, it's really glitchy, and that's
awesome.
Really cool.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Miles visits Peter's grave, where he apologizes for breaking his promise to use the USB stick to destroy the collider. But he's surprised by a guy in a trench coat, which is never a good thing, especially when you're a kid, who Miles electrocutes using a power he didn't know he had. Turns out this guy is also Spider-Man, and we see another quick montage of the Spider-Man's origin story. This is Peter B. Parker. Same thing. And aside from all the usual stuff we know about Spider-Man's origins, we tack on that he and Mary Jane got divorced. He made some bad investments, broke his back, cried in a bathtub, and gained like, seriously, 50 pounds. This is a way more relatable Spider-Man, in my opinion.
We've all been this Peter Parker before.
Don't invest in a Spider-Man themed restaurant. We see Peter get sucked from his universe to Miles through the Spider-Verse, where he sees that a younger, hotter, blonder version of himself died. And he realized whatever killed this Spider-Man must have brought him to this reality. We cut back to Miles attached to Peter B. Parker via a web, and Miles drags Spider-Man through the city while running from the cops and basically beats the absolute shit out of him while trying to save him.
Slamming him into every fucking thing the whole way through.
The other one died from the Kingpin punching him. Why doesn't getting hit by cars on a train kill this one?
They're merely flesh wounds.
Act 2. Let's get some motivation up in this thing.
Peter wakes up to find himself tied to the punching bag we saw in Aaron's apartment earlier, and Miles asks why this guy looks like Peter Parker, except older, less blonde, and fat. Then Miles figures out that he's Spider-Man from a parallel universe, and Spider-Man tells him not to watch the mouth, but to watch the hands, which is the same thing that my proctologist tells me. And then he escapes out the window. Miles tries to reason with new Spider-Man, but Peter decides to bail until he starts glitching out, which causes him to fall down the fire escape. Miles tells Peter about the collider, and he reluctantly decides to take the kid under his wing or leg, whatever spiders have under his leg.
One of the spiders got the wings.
He very reluctantly takes him under his wing, screaming into his arm and stuff. No, don't do it. All right, kid, come on. This is our not quite a hero anymore Spider-Man, who becomes a hero again through the course of the film.
It's just like Spider-Man's always talking to himself in comics, so it's like that. He's still got that. He's arguing with himself over it because the hero in him wants to take the kid and protect him, and the old broken down is like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
But he still wins out.
Get back to that pizza.
Still wins out. Yeah.
Peter B. Parker calls the USB that can stop the collider a goober, since any kind of device that fixes the thing that they're supposed to be destroying or whatever, he just calls a goober from here on out, and steals it from Miles before realizing it's broken. So they're all screwed unless he can steal the tech back that the dead Spider-Man previously stole. Peter says they don't have a second to lose, so they head to a burger place that is closed in this Peter's reality. I love this little scene. It's sets the character's tone so well. He's just kind of a loser. Definitely doesn't want to help Miles, but it's still got those little elements of Spider-Man that make him great. They head to Alchemex on a bus, which I thought was also really funny. A research company that has been teased several times throughout the film. There was a film playing in one of his classes. It says it on the USB stick, and it said it on the spider that bit Miles. They get suited up with Peter B. Parker wearing sweatpants and Miles wearing a cape. And we see that internet meme of Miles watching Spider-Man think about what he would do if he was the original Spider-Man or the original Peter Parker. I do hope that at some point we're going to get a little bit more of a time jump for Miles' character throughout these films. But spoilers, and Across the Spider-Verse, he's only a year older. So he's still only 15. Peter heads inside, leaving Miles to pout for a second before he spots Kingpin arriving at the lab. Miles sneaks inside to help Peter, who is annoyed initially, but realizes it's nice to have someone with him who isn't trying to kill him for a change. A doctor tries to warn Kingpin that they might open a black hole under New York if they fire up the collider again, but he doesn't care, of course. And Spider-Man sneaks in to get the files he needs off of a computer. Miles comes in after, but he can't figure out how to unstick himself from a light, which is a continuing theme throughout this whole thing of he can't figure out how to control any of his powers until suddenly he just can, which I guess is the same thing that happened with Spider-Man, where it just became instinct after a while. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Peter gives Miles his first lesson to relax, to harness his spider stickiness or whatever, which Miles does by singing to himself. Oh, and he turns invisible out of nowhere. So quite a few different abilities that Miles has that regular Spider-Man does not have. Falling from the ceiling makes a huge crash, which alerts the doctor, who comes into the lab, so Peter distracts her while Miles gets the files off the computer. Or, steals the entire computer since he can't find the files. He's just carrying the whole damn computer and the monitor while invisible. Doesn't really help. The doctor is over the moon to see Spider-Man since he's supposed to be dead, but we quickly find out that she has nefarious reasons for being interested in him since she's this reality's Doc Ock, which is Catherine Hahn, who crushes it and everything. I haven't watched the new Agatha series, but she was great in the WandaVision series. Yeah. She's always great. Mm-hmm. She strangles Peter while Miles makes a run for it with the computer. Miles runs directly into Gwen in the hallway. I guess she's like infiltrating the lab to try and find the files for herself. And when Peter gets away from Doc Ock, they head into a lunchroom where Peter steals a bagel that Miles throws at a guy's head, which somehow creates the bad guy for the next movie. But never mind that. I have a lot of questions about that, but it doesn't really matter. They had to set somebody up as the bad guy for the next movie. Peter gives Miles one of his web shooters, and they jump off the building while the bad guys shoot at them. Miles slowly starts to get the hang of it as Doc Ock gives chase, and he and Peter have a little bonding moment before Peter starts glitching out again. This gives Doc Ock the chance to catch up, and she takes back the computer. Suddenly, Peter and Miles get sucked into the trees by webs, and a new Spider-Man, or Spider-Girl woman, shows up dressed in black and white. She knocks out Doc Ock and takes the computer before joining Miles and Peter, who are shocked when they see that this girl is Gwanda from school. We then get treated to Spider-Gwen's origin story, where we find out she was bitten by a radioactive spider, joined a band, and wasn't able to save her best friend Peter Parker from dying after he transformed into Man-Bear Pig or whatever. They talk more about it in the sequel. Like he tried to become like a, I don't know, like a reptile or something. I don't know.
It was like that version's lizard.
Yeah,
that
I don't really know
lizard.
the Gwen Stacy story all that well, the Spider-Gwen version, but yeah, I know that Peter dies in that origin story. Anyway, she doesn't do and now she doesn't do friends anymore. I mean, doesn't have friends anymore. Also, she was sucked into this dimension the same way that Peter B. Parker was when the collider was activated. So in order to activate the collider, they have to use DNA from somebody. So like they used Kingpin's family originally, but then that never made it up there. Green Goblin pushed Spider-Man into the collider first, and that's where all of these versions came from. Her spider senses led her to Miles at his school, and the rest is history. The three of them thwip their way back to the city or to a bus. While we see Kingpin remember his family dying after seeing him as the monster that he is. You know, we get kind of Kingpin's motivations, which are well set up in a very quick scene. I feel like this film does really well what a lot of films don't do, is like setting character motivations without tons and tons of exposition and tons of buildup. Like you can set these things fairly quickly, but they're super necessary. Even if you only show for a second, it really gives you behind the motivations of a character. Like, you know, Kingpin could just be a just evil character who's just doing this for whatever reasons, but we actually get to see why he's doing it, and it makes a lot of sense as to why he's doing it. Kingpin asks Doc Ock how the hell there are multiple spider people all of a sudden, and she says it means that the collider works and she can bring his family back from an alternate reality where they lived and don't know that he's a murdering psychopath. Miles, Gwen, and Peter make their way to this reality's Aunt May's house, who is dead in Peter B. Parker's reality. And this Peter is nervous to see her again, but then over the moon when he gets to see his aunt alive again. Aunt May is shocked to see him, but immediately knows that he's not her Peter. I'd make a joke, but I'm not going to. And calls him fat and makes fun of his sweatpants. A slightly better animated role for Lily Tomlin than Mamo in The Ant Bully. She's really good in this. It just shows that she can be really good.
Yeah.
I mean, Lily Tomlin can be amazing. We've seen it before, but like, wow, they really just screwed her over with that Ant Bully role. She leads the spider trio to Peter's super fancy secret underground spider lair, which is filled with costumes, vehicles from the comics, and other spider people. Suddenly, 62 minutes into the film, we see Nick's character, Spider-Man Noir, as well as Penny Parker and Spider-Ham, a.k.a. Peter Porker, appear from the shadows. By the way, these are all real Spider-Man variants that all have had their own comic books over the years, or at least have made appearances in different things. Peter Porker is just really ridiculous. That character in general, but yeah, you had to add some levity to this otherwise sometimes a little bit heavy story.
Yeah. A spider bit by a radioactive pig that transforms into a spider pig.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Gwen, Miles, and Peter ask why Spider-Man Noir is in black and white and how his trench coat is flapping in the breeze when they're in a windowless basement. And he says,
Wherever I go, the wind follows. And the wind, it smells like rain.
God, I hope he talks like that in the TV show, like it's in the Amazon series.
Yeah.
I really hope that that's being filmed in black and white. It seems like it's being filmed in black and white.
Yeah. That he's wearing like a brown trench coat and stuff, which is like...
Yeah.
Yeah, which you'd think he wouldn't be if it was filmed in color. You'd think they'd put him in black, but
yeah,
who knows?
And the way they did, like, there's that one shot where he's on the street and he's like laying on the ground, and there's a spotlight on him, but it's like a yellow light.
Yeah,
I don't think you would ever do that unless you were filming in black and white, because
Yeah.
it's like brings out the highlights on the face in a different way. So I'm excited. I hope they do. I hope the whole thing is in black and white. I honestly hope it's filmed. Maybe not exactly, but like similar to how Sin City is, where it's like has that real like contrast black and white, comic book feel. We tell Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, and Penny Parker's origin stories the same way we did with the others. All were bit by spiders except Peter Porker, who was a spider that was bitten by a pig. Radioactive pig. In Noir's universe, it's 1933, and he's a private eye who fights Nazis. Penny is from New York in the year 3145 and has a psychic link with a spider that controls a mech suit that her father built. And Peter Parker frolics and he dances and he has things in his pants and et cetera, et cetera. You get it. Just a lot of those felt like John Mulaney ad-libs. They were actually encouraging John Mulaney to just improv in the booth, and most of his improvs involved cursing, and he eventually had to dial that back. They did apparently make a PG-13 cut of this film, but it hasn't seen the light of day yet. But that would be really fun to see Peter Porker cursing up a storm. Noir Spider-Man says the only way that they're all getting home is if one of them stays behind to destroy the collider after it's activated. And Miles says it has to be him, since if any of them stay, they'll die, since they're like breaking down, like their cells are breaking down on a molecular level because they're glitching in and out of this universe to another universe. And yeah. We haven't really established that yet, but like the longer they're there, the more they're going to glitch out. Spider-Man Noir asks who the kid is again, and Peter tries to get Miles to show off all of his cool powers, but of course, he still doesn't know how to control them. So the spider people have their doubts. Gwen vouches for Miles, and Spider-Man Noir says, "Okay, little fella, Kingpin's going to send a lot of mugs after you, and I'm talking hard boys, biscuit boxers. You think you can fight them all off at once?" It's like the one time he really goes full Humphrey Bogart. Then he tests Miles' reflexes by randomly tripping him and punching him in the face a bunch while saying, "Surprise attack!" They all bombard Miles with questions about whether he has what it takes to be a Spider-Man. And when he hears them all saying he's not ready for this, he turns invisible and leaves. It's about the worst thing that he could have done in that moment. It's just hightail it out of there. But, I think he has his own self-doubt of whether or not he can do this, which he slowly gets it over time as we go through. Miles decides to head to his Uncle Aaron's for a shoulder to cry on / guidance, but when he gets there, when he gets to his uncle's apartment, the Prowler shows up. And wouldn't you know it, the Prowler is his uncle. Miles is shocked and hightails it out of there, but Aaron hears him and gives chase again. Miles again manages to evade the Prowler, but we see the Prowler watching him go, so he tracks him. And we cut to Penny building a new goober for them to use to destroy the collider. The Spider Gang all wonder where Miles is, while Spider-Man Noir tries to figure out what the colors on a Rubik's Cube are, since he's now only ever seen black and white. Like, great little detail. No, that's not purple. Spider Ham is just great in those little moments. Miles shows up to tell them the Prowler is his uncle, and Spider-Man Noir says, "This is a pretty hardcore origin story." Of course, by heading to Aunt May's, Miles led Kingpin and his gang straight to them, and Doc Ock busts through the front door. Scorpion and Tombstone show up, and Aunt May asks if they can take it outside, to which Spider-Man Noir says,
We don't pick the ballroom, we just dance.
That was great.
They proceed to destroy May's entire house, while the goober gets passed to all of the different spider people away from all the villains and stuff. It's a great little, I don't know, the setting of it being just in this like middle class house felt like it could have happened in the Family Man's house or something. They're just fighting in Jersey somewhere or Brooklyn or wherever they live. I think she lives in Queens, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Peter Parker's from Queens, right?
Yeah.
Miles eventually gets a hold of the goober and tries to run while Prowler beats the crap out of his nephew. On the roof, Prowler holds Miles by the neck, and when Miles takes off his mask, Aaron also takes off his mask and is shocked to see that the kid is his nephew. He lets Miles go, and Kingpin immediately shoots him for kind of sort of disobeying him for like a second, which seems pretty harsh. It's hard to find bad guys, you know?
Yeah, why is Kingpin just hanging out? Like,
yeah, he's just like sitting in
watching.
the alley, just watching the whole thing.
just shoot him. But
I'm going to shoot him if he
why
lets
didn't
him
he
go.
just shoot Spider-Man?
Yeah.
That moment is so good, though. When
he recognizes
Aaron's
him.
like, no. Like, he knows that one of them's going to die now, and it's not going to be Miles. Like, he needs to make sure that Miles is safe. That's why he puts the mask back on him or whatever. And like,
Yeah, you get the sense that Aaron is a good guy at heart, but made some bad choices.
which is the theme of the movie. One of the themes.
Yeah, pretty much.
The choices.
Yeah. Which kind of seems like it's sort of the theme of the second movie is, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's your choices that make you who you are, you know. Miles swings off into the city while carrying his uncle, and in an alley, Aaron tells his nephew he's sorry he let him down and that Miles is the best of them and that he just needs to keep going. Aaron dies, and Miles' dad shows up to the scene to try and bust the little Spider-Man, but Miles turns invisible and leaves, and Jefferson finds his brother dead on the ground and puts an APB out on the new Spider-Man. There's a lot of great emotional pieces here. Especially throughout this part. I feel like they do such a good job in this film of the emotional weight of everything. Like, I feel like in comic book movies in general, they don't add any weight to death, which is like the heaviest thing that could happen to a person, and they just kind of breeze through it because it's just so commonplace and stuff. But like when you actually sit with an emotion for a second and actually can portray that on screen, it's so much more powerful.
And I feel like you have to do it to Spider-Man because that's the core of Spider-Man's character is some tragic death. I think it's one of the things that they didn't do with the MCU Spider-Man. Well, I guess they eventually did later, but it was one of the. I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword because like you don't really want to rehash it because you've seen it so many times and blah blah blah. It's like his Uncle Ben's dead. We know. Well, we never get that moment though with this. I mean, we sort of get one. I guess spoilers for No Way Home, but we never had that specific moment with the Tom Holland Spider-Man.
Yeah, so, it had already happened in that reality before.
It's not the same type of thing. That's not Peter's fault, and that's part of the core. What's the core to the Spider-Man character is Aaron and Ben. It's sort of his fault. You know, it's not really his fault with Aaron, or with either of them, but they feel that guilt that it was their fault. And so when you get that moment of seeing them actually die on screen, you can help get that emotional core to the character and connect to them.
Really motivates the reality of that character, and like you can see why they do the things that they do, and what changes to make them become the hero. Miles loses it in his dorm and throws everything all around and stuff, but the Spider Gang show up to comfort him. They tell him that they all lost somebody on their journey to become Spider-Man, just like him. And Miles says something like, you don't understand. It's like, yeah, we're the only people who understand. Then Miles's roommate shows up. So they all climb on the ceiling until he spots them and passes out. They kind of set this guy up as kind of the Ned character almost. Miles immediately reveals himself as Spider-Man later on to this guy when he like meets his roommate. Like he doesn't really know him. Which seems weird to me, but whatever. The Spider Gang decide that Miles isn't ready, and they all say goodbye. Peter B. Parker tests Miles to see if he can finally harness his powers, while the rest of the gang hang outside the window to see if he passes the test. But Miles fails to control his powers, so Peter uses his webs to tie Miles to a chair and takes the goober from him. Miles asks, "When will I know I'm ready?" And Peter says, "You won't. It's a leap of faith." And the Spider Gang all head off to the collider while Miles watches them go.
Act 3. It's about time to wrap this thing up.
Jefferson shows up at Miles' dorm room to deliver the bad news about Aaron, but Miles can't respond since his mouth is spider-webbed shut. I'd make a joke, but I'm not going to cheapen the moment or this incredible movie.
It reminded me of like when Neo's mouth gets shut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not making the joke though.
Jeff
we all know what the joke is.
Jeff can see his son's shadow under the door, so he tells him the reason he pushes Miles so hard is because he sees so much potential in him that no matter what he chooses to do in his life, he will be great. Jefferson tells Miles he loves him, and this is finally the moment where Miles finds his strength. I think that he's got this whole thing of all these expectations placed on him, and he doesn't like it. He rails against it as any teenager would, but this is like he finally understands why everybody put all these expectations on him and that he can live up to them.
Yeah.
And he has to. He uses his electrical power to bust out of the webs, and he heads to Aunt May's where he gets her help to make a new suit. He heads to the top of a crazy tall building this time, and he takes a leap of faith that Anne learns to control the web shooters to swing through the city to the collider in the most badass scene in the film. The song is great.
Can't stop it now. Yeah, it's a rad sequence.
Yeah. Except they bust somebody's window to do it, which is kind of a dick move.
That's an office.
Meanwhile, the Spider Gang show up on a bus and sneak into Wilson Fisk's building to get to the collider under the building. It's just in this universe, no one ever cares. Like, it's not a big deal to see people dressed like Spider-Man on public transit. It reminds me of the
mech suit and a black and white Spider-Man and a pig.
It reminds me of the loading screen in the Spider-Man video game. The loading screens if you fast travel when he's like sitting on the subway reading his phone. Kingpin is having a fundraiser to celebrate Spider-Man for some reason, the night that he's doing this big experiment. And all the wait staff are dressed as him, so the gang sneak in as waiters, even though they don't look anything like this universe's Spider-Man, but nobody seems to care. So, whatever.
Tasteless, but respectable. I guess Spider Ham calls it out.
Peter B. Parker spots MJ and gets distracted. Why is MJ doing a talk at Kingpin's gala? I guess I'll get to it. It's one of my questions.
I sort of just skipped questions. I didn't really write any questions here, but this is one of my biggest ones. Like, wouldn't Mary Jane know who Wilson Fisk is?
Yeah.
He's a bad guy.
Anyway, it's weird. Well, he gets distracted. She asks him for some bread, and he apologizes for not being there when she needed him with the bread. Underground Doc Ock is getting the collider ready, which has already been completely rebuilt. But like we said, Mary Jane would know that Wilson Fisk is a bad guy because
unless does this version of, well, no, she knows that he's Spider-Man.
Yeah, she gives the talk at his funeral, so it's kind of weird.
But she doesn't know who the bad guys are? I mean, she would know who Norman was and who Wilson Fisk was, and I don't know.
Yeah, and because Spider-Man knows who Fisk is when he fights him, so it's not like he didn't know that Fisk was a bad guy.
This is true.
So the team arrive at the collider just as it fires up again, and then they head out. They head in to put in the goober. Of course, they're spotted immediately because it's a big, well-lit, cylindrical room. And Doc Ock stops Peter from shutting the machine down. Just when things look grim, Miles shows up to save the day using Doc Ock's tentacles to punch her in the face while he's invisible. We see Miles in his final full costume form, and the team are all stoked that he at last knows how to control his powers on command. Peter tells him, "I love you. I'm so proud of you. Do I want kids?" Which, spoilers, kind of sets up his character arc in the sequel. The scientists find genetic matches for Fisk's wife and son in other dimensions, but they say it's too risky, to which Kingpin, of course, says, "Shut up and turn it up." It's like doing it while they're having this giant fight in the middle of his collider doesn't seem like the best plan, but
yeah.
He's that desperate, I guess.
He's so desperate to get his family back in any way possible that he will completely destroy the entire planet and shatter every universe, all reality.
But even though last time this happened, it spawned a bunch of Spider-Man into it, so he could have had that happen again if another Spider-Man gets thrown into the collider this time, and he'd make his problems even worse. But buildings and buses and trains and all sorts of debris start showing up from inside the chamber from all these different New Yorks, I guess, and then they add to the chaos.
Yeah, even like the Brooklyn Bridge shows up, and like it's kind of crazy. I don't know that there would be that much space in there for all these things to show up. So
I guess that creates the question: did that just fuck over all these other universes' New Yorks by ripping big vehicles and people and cars and buildings straight into this thing to get smashed up?
I feel like the implication is that they would go back, but they would probably be smashed up in those other realities.
Yeah. They probably weren't empty trains. I mean, I guess the one that they were on was empty, but anyway, don't think about it. Spider-Man Noir fights Tombstone and calls him a hard-boiled turtle slapper. And we see Penny's robot get taken out by the Scorpion.
Penis Parker.
Spider-Man drops an anvil on his head, and then he, Penny, and Spider-Man Noir kick his ass.
Did that feel like a cartoon?
Gwen gets knocked out by Doc Ock, but Miles saves her and with Peter's help swings her up so she can punch Doc Ock in the face. They buckle up for a final big showdown, but Doc Ock gets hit by a semi-truck that's floating in the collider.
Which I'm guessing that didn't kill Doc Ock, so she could show up again.
Probably not. Peter again insists on being the one who sacrifices himself, but Miles says he's got it and reveals that he stole the goober while saying, "Don't watch the mouth, watch the hands," which is what my wife's gynecologist always whispers in her ear before each exam. Miles smoothly swings around to the spot to insert the goober, showing us he's a full-blown Spider-Man now, while Gwen and Peter watch impressed. Penny is heartbroken to see her father's robot dead, but she retrieves the spider she has a psychic link with, and all of the Spider Gang head up to say goodbye to Miles. Kingpin loses it when he sees Miles has control of the collider and starts smashing stuff. The Spider Gang all say their goodbyes to Miles one by one, starting with Penny. Then Spider-Man Noir says,
"I love you all. I'm taking this cube thing with me. I don't understand it, but I will."
Talking about the Rubik's Cube, of course. Which he had solved it.
Yeah, he solves it at the end, yeah.
Spider-Ham gives Miles a cartoon mallet, which I love.
It'll fit in your pocket.
It'll fit in your pocket. And Miles gives Gwen the same time as relative joke from when they first met before shaking her hand and asking if they can be friends. You know, since she doesn't do friends anymore. I mean, she doesn't make friends. You know.
Maybe she does do friends.
Yeah. Finally, Peter B. Parker goes to say goodbye, but they're interrupted by Kingpin. Peter says he'll hold him off while Miles closes the portal, but Miles stops him and tells him he needs to go home. When Peter says he can't let Spider-Man die, Miles says, "Neither can I," and he trips Peter before grabbing him the same way Peter did to him in the dorm room. Miles says, "You gotta go home, man." And Peter says, "How do I know I won't mess it up again?" before realizing it's a leap of faith. Peter heads back to his universe, leaving Miles to deal with Kingpin on his own. Miles jumps into a subway train floating through the collider, and Kingpin grabs Miles by the throat. Suddenly, Wilson's family appear and see him being violent and run away from him in fear once again while glitching in and out. Kingpin chases after them before busting out of the train to stop Miles from closing the portal. Miles' dad arrives in the control room, and we see the new Spider-Man battling Wilson Fisk in the Collider. They go round and round for a bit, with Kingpin basically kicking Miles' ass before he tells Miles, "You took my family, and now I'm going to make sure you never see yours again." I could do a better Italian accent, but I'm not going to. Italian-American accent. Mafia boss accent. Uh-huh. Kingpin punches Miles the same way he did OG Spider-Man when he killed him in Act 1, but Miles gets up, fueled by the love of his dad and the echoes of the other Spider-Man saying, "Can you get back up no matter how many times you're hit?" And then he says, "I am all the Jedi." Now, actually, he tells Kingpin, "I'll always have my family. You ever hear the shoulder touch?" And then he zaps Kingpin with his electrical power, sending him flying.
Hey.
Not sure why that works when Kingpin was like being hit by fucking trains and subway cars and stuff just fine, but whatever.
Yeah. They always make Kingpin so like unbelievably strong.
Yeah. In
the comics and stuff. I'm glad that they went with the real like, you know, comic book look of Kingpin, which is so unrealistic. Like there's this tiny head on this gigantic body, but it works for the comics. That's the cool thing about this is like they kept the original look of all of the different like Tombstone looks like Tombstone and not some fat bald guy like he did in and Scorpion and Green Goblin is a gigantic, you know, monster. And, it's like more accurate to the comics.
Miles catches him with his webs and throws Fisk into the building, stopping the Collider, turning everything back to normal. The Collider explodes, and we see Jefferson putting Tombstone into a cop car, which I just think is funny. It's like putting supervillains into a cop car.
Yeah.
Miles calls him, and they have a heart-to-heart about his Uncle Aaron, and Jefferson invites Miles to throw some of his graffiti up on the walls of the police station. Miles starts crying, and then he swings into the crime scene and hugs his dad while disguised as Spider-Man. Miles puts on a voice and says, "I look forward to working with you," and then tells him he loves him, much to Jefferson's confusion. Why is this 5-foot-tall man telling me he loves me and then hugging me? Spider-Man tells Jefferson to look behind him, and we see Kingpin dangling from webs in the air with a note that says, "From your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." And then they put him in a cop car.
That's kind of what they did in Daredevil. They just kind of put him into a regular jail cell. And
the Daredevil Kingpin wasn't like super strong strength man, whatever. Finally, we see the same style origin story montage we got with the other Spider people, where we see that Miles has finished his big essay, saved a bunch of people, spray painted a mural in honor of his uncle with his dad, and we see that the Spider people in their respective universes, with Penny building a new robot, Spider-Man Noir having solved the Rubik's Cube, Peter Porker eating a hot dog, which is pretty messed up, Gwen looking at the photos of she and Miles together. When did they take photos? Anyway, and Peter trying to make things right with Mary Jane.
There was apparently a joke from Peter Porker in the scene where they talk about all of them losing somebody, and like he says something about like losing a friend who's a ham, and he ended up like smelling him being cooked or something, and like they were like everybody laughed their asses off in that scene, but it ended up taking everybody out of the emotion that they were trying to get. He smelled delicious.
We see Miles listening to music in his bedroom just as we did when we were first introduced to him, but this time the ceiling opens up and Gwen asks if he's got a minute. I gotta say, unexpectedly dropping in above a 14-year-old's bed is pretty risky business, but I guess that's part of the hero life. The end. Now, wait. We get to hear part of Spider-Man's Christmas album during the credits, and we see Spider-Man 2099 show up at the end of the credits to tease the story that would eventually become Across the Spider-Verse. Oh, and we get to make a joke where multiple Spider-Men point at each other from the memes. The end.
That's the first
1960s Spider-Man cartoon.
Interdimensional jump that he makes is to the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon.
Complete with that super deep Spider-Man voice. That's so weird.
Who are you?
A 50-year-old man to play Spider-Man in that.
Yeah, it's perfect. If you couldn't tell, we all love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But unfortunately for us, when we went to do this episode, Into the Spider-Verse was nowhere to be found online. But thankfully, we were able to use Surfshark to use a European IP thanks to their VPN capabilities. You see, with Surfshark, you can hop IP addresses with ease, since they offer 3,200 servers in over 100 countries, which will get you around many streaming services' region blocks. So you can access the content you want, when you want it, and not have to worry about what movies or TV shows streamers choose to let you watch that week. Make your online life easier today by heading over to surfshark.deals/onecagepod and make sure to enter our promo code OneCagePod to save 83% and get 3 extra months for free.
It's time to keep track. Here are the final stats.
Nigel, you want to hit us with the Cage curse tracker?
Still none.
Turtle slapper.
Turtle slapper and biscuit boxer, but I don't think they were maybe euphemisms, but I don't think they were curses.
Yeah.
So yeah, that continues the mostly G-rated streak from these animated movies. The only one he's actually sworn was G-Force, where he was, oh God. Whatever. Yeah, so we are at 718 total curses still. I don't think he swears in the Croods too. I'd be surprised if he has some kind of a curse. So we'll probably wrap up these animated movies with no more curses, but we'll see.
I don't think there's anything, but
I still always have the notebook at the ready to write them down while I'm watching.
Runtime, this was 117 minutes, so just under 2 hours. Which puts it near the top, sandwiched between Joe, which was also 117 minutes, and Matchstick Men, which is 116. Both excellent films. Nudity, I'll just move on. State and Country Tracker, we're in New York. Not, DC does their like fake New York, but Marvel keeps it actual New York. So we jumped around to multiple boroughs too, but it's all just New York. That is, I believe, our 10th time to New York now. Budget versus gross. This was a $90 million budget, which is hefty, but it made $384.3 million back, which is a substantial gain. That brings our total up to $1.890.5 billion budget, and we have now made over $4 billion, $4.360.6 billion.
Contribute all of this film's success to Nicolas Cage.
Yes. This movie made $384 million just because of Nic Cage. Obviously. Yeah.
Why else are we talking about it?
I know. That actually puts it at number 3 on our list, behind The Croods and National Treasure Book of Secrets. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that we can't include Across the Spider-Verse because, like I said, I think it made like 800, which is nuts. But yeah, $384.3 million, which is above National Treasure, which was $347.5. So as far as the live action Nic Cage movies, we still have Book of Secrets as the top grossing film of his career, at least in our timeline of the random ass order that we're going in with all these movies. Ratings, this was our 10th PG film, which now ties it with PG-13. But as far as I know, this will probably be our last PG film. I don't know where. Well, no, we got one more. We got The Croods coming up, The Croods 2. And then, I don't know. I can't really think of anything else that would be PG after that. And that leads us over to The Cage Kill Tracker.
Yeah, again, he didn't kill anybody. He could have. He should have. But he didn't. So 0 kills, still at 202. And then he survived, obviously. He's not the Spider-Man that got killed. So 0 deaths for him in this one, which puts us at 14 for our entire show so far. I have a feeling
it's kind of nuts that
change.
We've done 50 plus episodes of this show already.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
And there's so much more. We're not even halfway through.
So much more, yeah.
Yeah.
Where does this masterpiece fall? Let's rank this film on the Cageometer.
That leads us over to the most important question that we ask on the show. Vince, where does Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse from 2018 rate on your Cageometer?
So this one's tough for me because Nick's in it for such a small amount of time. I kind of go back and forth on what I should give it. Originally, I was thinking an 8 because it's not a real Nic Cage. It's not a true Nic Cage film, right? He's not a main character, and he's not even really a secondary character, right? But because if I judging it as the film by itself, right? If I'm just taking it as the film, I mean, from the writing, directing, acting, the visuals, and the music, I mean, it and skewed in my own personal opinion because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. Like, this is a perfect film to me. So have to give it a 10. The film a 10. It sucks that he wasn't in it more. I wish he would have been. But I think we could probably all agree they used him perfectly in this film. He was peppered in, and his moments were great, and it didn't overshadow the rest of the film, which could easily have happened with any of the extra characters that were in it, right? So I'll give the film a 10. This is one of those films that I could watch again and again and again and again and never get bored of it. As far as Nick, I'll give him an 8. Again, if he had more time, this score could have gone up, or very well could have gone down. Who knows how his character is gonna play out in the live action series, if it's gonna be too much to handle, or if this was like the perfect dose. But I think he brought a lot to the performance, and it sounds like they allowed him to bring a lot to that performance. And I'll stick to what I always said. I think he has a great voice for voice acting for animated projects, and I really did enjoy his performance. He brought that character to life. Having known nothing about that character, he made me feel like this is a really well developed character that I probably should have been watching all this time. He crushed it. I loved it. I loved how he did. They wrote him the best lines that they possibly could have written, and he nailed the performance on him. So it's got to give a lot of credit to that writing team, giving him grade A material to work with, and then him just knocking it out of the park. I'm glad he didn't go dog eat dog on us. But I did enjoy the way that he chose to portray this character, and obviously it was good enough to generate a live action show. So we'll see how that goes.
I really wonder how he got attached to this movie. Like, was it they wanted Nicolas Cage, or he heard about it and he wanted to apply, and they wanted somebody who's doing like a noir voice Humphrey Bogart impression, and he was like, oh, I can do that, and he did it.
If I remember right from the behind the scenes, they kind of like put their like shooting for the moon choices, and Cage was the one that they chose. And we're just like, well, if we can get him, we're not gonna, but if we can get him, he would be great for this role. And then he was like, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Which, you know,
so he's like, I got a weekend.
He loves Marvel and loves Spider-Man, and Spider-Man Noir is like, you know, a kind of a perfect vessel for him.
Oh yeah.
I do kind of wish that they were making the show animated, because I feel like it plays better as an animated story than a live action.
I mean, depending, we don't know what the tone is.
I'm very interested to see what the tone is and how. I mean, because they made that decision. It's got to be live action, so they have a vision in mind. And at this point, I trust them to pull it off. I know we talked a little bit about the sequel to this not being as perfect as this film, which again I think suffers because it's not a complete story. It was intended to always end on that cliffhanger, and unfortunately due to COVID and whatever other reasons, we're having a much longer delay in it being released. But I think if they had been released simultaneously or pretty damn close together, kind of like Matrix 2 and 3, I think we'd be more favorable, and I'm hoping we'll reflect back on that middle film a little more favorably after we see the conclusion of the story. But so I mean, I gotta trust their vision. I mean, they nailed this fucking movie. So 10 for the film, 8 for our boy Nicolas Kim Coppola.
All right, Nigel, where does Into the Spider-Verse rate on your Cageometer?
I mean, I guess it's pretty clear. I don't know who needs to hear that this movie is great, because either you've already seen it and you know that, or you haven't and you're not interested in it for one reason or another. I guess for those people, you should watch this movie unless you completely hate everything about comic books or Spider-Man or just good movies or hand-drawn and CG animation or films that have lots of love and care put into the craft of the medium that they are creating. Then I guess avoid this movie. For everybody else, should see this movie because it is a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. It is fantastic across the board. It's not exactly a kids movie, but it's got animation that kids can enjoy, and all the way through adults. Everybody can enjoy this movie. There's something about it. I don't really have a lot of gripes. I feel like they're stupid nitpicks based on my own personal preferences. I guess if I had one, it would just be that I felt that the third act kind of came along really fast, and Miles just sort of like had his powers. We watch him progress through the movie of struggling with it and not really understanding this stuff, and then it just like flips a switch and now he's Spider-Man. But I guess that's the point that they were going for, is once he accepted that he could do it and believed in himself or whatever, made that choice to just be Spider-Man and take that leap of faith, then that was it. He had the powers. So it's thematic to it. So it's kind of a nitpick to complain about getting to that point taking too long. But yeah, we've hashed it. The casting across the board is perfect. All of the voice acting is fantastic. The writing of it is layered, much more nuanced than I thought. I've watched it 4 times almost. And you continue to discover stuff every time you watch it, and talk about it. There was stuff that came up while we were talking about it that I hadn't considered, that they specifically crafted into the film. So it's fantastic. It's gorgeous. It's action. I think it's the best Spider-Man movie ever made. I'm like Vince. I love Spider-Man. I find something to like in every single one of the live action Spider-Man movies that's made, even the ones people shit on. But this one is easily the best out of all of them. And I don't know if it's just, I don't know what, it's just a perfect concoction of, paying attention to the source material, stylizing it like a comic, but also doing its own thing, having its own feel and visual look to it. And because it's animated, you can get away with doing a lot of this stuff that would not be possible in live action. The part that blew my mind where they cut his frames down to 12 frames per second while Miles is like fumbling around with his powers. You couldn't do that in a live action thing. You could do it in animation, and I didn't even notice it. Subconsciously you do, but that's not something you would have intentionally even realized was possible in a film, let alone what they were doing to kind of use that visual medium in a way that you don't expect, and can't be done with a lot of live action stuff because its animation is incredible. So yeah, see it. It's an origin story, so it kind of falls into some of those trappings that get kind of cliched for it, but I think it does them in a fresh way that's entertaining. And especially if you've seen Spider-Man a billion times, Spider-Man origin story has been rehashed 3 times now, at least in live action. This is another spin on it that stands alone on its own. And it's easy to understand, even if you haven't read the comics, why Miles Morales is such a popular character to the point that they brought him into the mainline Spider-Man universe, because he was originally intended to be, I think it was the Ultimate Universe Spider-Man in his own thing. And he was so popular and so endearing that they found a way to bring him over into the main one and work alongside the Peter Parker Spider-Man. Which is now extended through things like the Insomniac Spider-Man video games, which are also fantastic. So yeah, this movie gets it. It gets that secret sauce and that character, and it hits on all cylinders, or fires on all cylinders and hits all targets. It's 10 out of 10. There, I'm done gushing about it. As far as Cage's performance, it's hard to give him anything beyond an 8, which is what I will give him just right out the gate, because he's not in it as much. But that said, what we got from him, I think, is his best animated performance out of any of the animated stuff that we've watched. His best voice work performance. It ironically compared to it stands up to something like, or alongside something like G-Force, where he is playing an actual character that you can stop thinking of as Nicolas Cage reading lines in a booth and just accept it for he's Spider-Man noir. In what little lines he's given, he delivers them in a way that feels suitable to that dimension, to that universe, whatever, to that character. It's different from all the other Spider-Man. It definitely feels like a Humphrey Bogart 1950 or 1930s, I guess, black and white cartoon version of Spider-Man. And he has one of the most emotional moments in the movie for me when Penny's little robot gets killed and he comes over to comfort her and he just says something like, are you okay? And the way he says it feels so fatherly and comforting and mentor. And then he's like, come on, let's go. And he like picks her up or helps her get up and stuff. It's not like he's trying to coddle her or anything. He's just checking in on her and he knows that, I don't know. It makes me tear up just thinking about it. Just the way he says it.
Same with that moment where he says, I love you all at the, like right before he goes back to his universe. Like the way that he says it is just so impactful in that moment. That like, it almost kind of takes you out because you're like, God damn, that was like, so it's like emotionally impactful in that moment where it's like, they're kind of making jokes at the same time. But like, that's where this movie really like succeeds for me is like, they have that emotion, but they also have the jokes at the same time. It's like, you know, how Renfield just had the jokes and shit all over the emotion. It was, you know, it's the opposite here where it's like they can do both. You can do both at the same time and find that balance. Yeah. And they were definitely at heartfelt deliveries across the board, whether he's trying to ham it up and be the funny, you know, making noir jokes or those small little emotional moments that he gets. He dialed in and he did it. And I don't know if, again, we always talk about this. Was it a Nic Cage thing? Was it a voice direction thing? Was it kind of meet in the middle of both? Either way, whatever it was a secret sauce got him to nail this character. Yeah. So like I said, 8 out of 10, I would give it more just based on the fact that what he gave us was almost perfect, but there's just not enough to tell if to give it a higher score, you know? Maybe if he had been, I mean, he's like a tertiary character at best in it. If he'd been a secondary supporting character or something, you know, on the lines of the Peter B. Parker that we got, there'd be more to work with. But for what we got, I think that's about as high as I can give it. And it was still a great performance. By the way, just wanted to mention it that apparently Penny Parker was supposed to die originally in the when they were writing it. They were going to have her die in that scene, but they were like, "This is way too heavy for this kids movie," so they just had the robot die, and then of course you see
which
her
is
repair,
itself is emotional because it's like you know her dad built the robot and their dad's dead, so that's her last connection. But the spider's fine, so it's like you know you get that kind of hopeful. All right, we can rebuild and she'll be okay. But, yeah. I just love that interaction between her and him, and I think Spider-Ham comes over to help her too, where it's just like, you know, they all know it, they all get it, it's lost, but then they're there for each other, but they still have a job to do, so they get back to it.
All right, on my Cageometer, you know, obviously, I love this movie. I think it's a masterpiece. Like you guys said, it's the best Spider-Man film, in my opinion. And there have been some great Spider-Man films, but this one just blows it away. It's just amazing. Like I said, like the emotional scenes are just so well done and so well like crafted, and they let things breathe to a point where it's like it doesn't stick for too long, but it sticks long enough to really like make an impact. I wish they would have spent a little bit more time on Aaron. I feel like they kind of bypassed him pretty quickly. But you know, there's only so much time you have in these films. Yeah. And like realistically, he wouldn't have had very much time with Aaron before the cops showed up. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, he has to move on. And then I kind of agree with Nigel where it's like, feels like he gets his powers a little too quickly. But, you know, there's, like you said, you know, it's kind of the leap of faith. He has to take that moment and be like, no, I am Spider-Man. Fuck it. I'm going to do it, you know. And then he does. And he struggles with it for a minute, but then he starts to get it. And once he does, he realizes like he finds that confidence and becomes Spider-Man in that moment, which is a great moment. I feel like that's the biggest moment of the whole film is like when he really realizes he is Spider-Man. Going down the list, like direction from the three directors is incredible. The editing is amazing. The music is incredible. The visuals are just stunning. Absolutely gorgeous. I hope that they're able to do Beyond the Spider-Verse the way that they want to and aren't pushed to complete it quickly just to, make Sony a ton of money, because obviously they care about the craft and they really took their time on this film, and it shows, and it's perfect. I don't think Across the Spider-Verse is as dialed in as this one, and I feel like it's studio interference, and that's the problem with these things is like once Sony gets involved, they kind of take the reins and screw it up. They can't get out of their own way. But thank God they got out of the way for this first one and were able to give us this amazing film. As far as Cage, I'll agree, echo what you guys said. I can't give him higher than an 8, so I'll just go with an 8. He's great in all of his little. I mean, he's only has like 8 lines, I swear. Kind of the same as like with Teen Titans, where it's like he just showed up for a second, but the moments are so much better and so much more impactful and are just so well crafted and acted by Cage in those scenes where he does show up that I wish we could have gotten more of him. But like you said, I feel like we got just the perfect amount. It's like, you don't want to add too much salt to the recipe. Too much Cage might have taken us out, might have been too goofy. But like his scenes are perfect. And he feels like a noir detective who came from the 30s, and like, and like you said, he has that like fatherly feel to him. And I don't know really much about Spider-Man noir, if he is a father in that story, but that would be kind of a cool new angle to the character of Spider-Man, is like having him be a father who's like looking after his kids and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, I think he's great, and I hope that he comes back in Beyond the Spider-Verse, and we can do a Beyond the Spider-Verse episode where maybe we do like a little Across the Spider-Verse recap, and then we can do another one of these, and hopefully it concludes in a satisfying way that Across the Spider-Verse didn't conclude, but I feel like they're going to stick the landing. These guys clearly know what they're doing. And I think that's why they're taking more time on it than they originally were going to. That's it for this episode of One Cage at a Time. As always, be sure to drop us an email, onecagepodcast@gmail.com, to let us know if we missed anything, or hit us up with suggestions to improve the show, comments, compliments, or simply to gush about the legend that is Nicolas Cage. On the last day of the 7 days of animated Cagemas, I cannot believe that we made it through these fucking movies. We
should have done Spider-Verse first or last. just to.
I just kind of like put them in order that they were released. Really, we're just trying to get through these. We mostly are doing the animated films this year because they're shorter, and we have way less time. Especially Nigel has way less time because he's got 2 kids to deal with now, rather than just 1 kid, and does not have the time to devote to our stupid little podcast over here that he normally would have. And also, I figured by doing the animated films, we could give you something that you could watch with the kids. But anyways, we wanted to get these out of the way, and thank God we're almost there. The only animated film that we have left on our list is, of course, The Croods: A New Age, which I keep wanting to call A New Dawn, and I think it's because of Mandy. Children of the New Dawn. Where Nick once again plays an overprotective cave dad, where we once again watch some cute sloths say "dun dun dun" over and over and over again. I counted. There's only 3 in this one.
Oh, okay,
thank God. I think there's like 6 in the first one. But we follow the Croods as they search for a new home, but this time, when they find the perfect place to live, they must contend with a bunch of hippies who are very similar to Guy. But, anyways, you get the idea. Grug struggles with his family slowly becoming douchebags as well. I don't know. I liked it better than the first Croods, personally. I'm interested to see what you guys think of it, but I thought it was better paced, and Cage gets more to do, and I feel like Cage gets to go more off the rails than he did in the first movie. And I had more fun watching it than I did the first one. And the world feels more fleshed out than it did the first time around. So I feel like a lot of the things that the first one struggled with, this one succeeds with. But of course, it was a pandemic victim. It came out in like September of 2020, which was not a good time for a movie to come out.
No.
We had a few issues with going to the movies in 2020. But anyways, make sure to check it out wherever fine films are sold or on your streaming service of choice. Until then, we'll say goodbye the way we do each and every episode with our Nicolas Cage quote of the film.
Okay, little fella, Kingpin's gonna send a lot of mugs after you, and I'm talking hard boys, real biscuit boxers. Can you fight them all off at once?
Thanks for listening to One Cage at a Time. Visit us online at onecageatatime.com or follow us on the social media platform of your choice for more Nicolas Cage goodness. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you really like the show, become a member of our Patreon where you can download unedited and ad-free episodes as well as listen to our follow-up show, Back Into the Cage, where we re-examine each movie to discuss what we missed the first time around, answer listener questions, and wax poetic about the man, the myth, the legend that is Nicolas Cage.
Would you mind taking this outside?
We don't pick the ballroom, we just dance.